Hello, welcome to the debate on Sky News. I'm Martin Stanford. Here's our take on developments brought together from America, the UK and around the world. The White House race has started. First off, the man who's destined never to be president.
I believe in you. I believe in the power of millions of courageous conservatives rising up to reignite the promise of America. And that is why today I am announcing that I'm running for President of the United States.
Also, from riches to rags, working in the slums of Cairo. And the scramble to buy the .adult and .porn domain names. Policies maketh a politician, and Ted Cruz has a brimming bouquet of them as he becomes the first major 2016 presidential candidate. But what do the people want from their new president? Obamacare? Tighter regulation? Tighter immigration? Simpler taxes? The list of domestic, economic and social issues is endless. Well, in a moment, we speak to the independent presidential candidate, Dr. Ben Carson. But first, let's introduce our regular contributors, Jeffrey Robinson and the Conservative commentator Armstrong Williams. They are standing by in New York and Washington, respectively. We should mention, Armstrong, that you are a friend of Dr. Carson and indeed his business manager.
Thank you for that full disclaimer. Yes, that is correct.
So why do you think he should be standing in the contest next year?
You know, as his business manager, it doesn't necessarily indicate that I'm part of the campaign. He has his own separate apparatus for that. But I am a confidant and an advisor. And I think because you're so honored to have Dr. Carson on the day, I think he's best to speak for himself.
We'll hear from him in just a moment. But do you think, Jeffrey, that the presidential race from both parties and from independents is really beginning to hot up now?
Well, no, not hot up, no, because Ted Cruz is not a serious candidate. Ted Cruz is a clown. He's the court jester, and his only claim to fame at the moment is that he's driving the Republican clown car. He keeps saying, I believe in you, but nobody believes in Ted Cruz. I mean, he believes in the tooth fairy. His chances of becoming president are even less than yours. And you're not allowed to run because you weren't born in America. Then again, neither was he. Very interesting in that he denounced President Obama for being born in Kenya, which of course he wasn't. But Ted Cruz conveniently forgets the birther argument when it's brought up that he was born in Canada. He's also a terrible hypocrite. He's spent all this time denying Obamacare and has just announced that he would actually sign up for it. I mean, the man is a joke. Personally, though, I hope that he does become the Republican candidate. I would love to see Hillary go against him because a Cruz ticket would make the Goldwater defeat and destruction of the Republican Party look like a victory.
OK, we'll come back to that in just a minute. But let's bring in Dr. Ben Carson, shall we? Because we're lucky to have him with us today. And it's good to talk to an independent presidential candidate. So, Dr. Carson, we need to ask you the obvious question first up then. Where were you born? Are you qualified to take on this role?
Well, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, which is part of the United States. And, you know, I'm not sure anybody's totally qualified to take on this role. But it is a serious, serious situation that we find ourselves in right now. The United States is the pinnacle nation in the world. And there are a lot of responsibilities that go with being the pinnacle nation in terms of leadership. Couple that with the fact that we have more than an $18 trillion national debt. And look at the world historical map. You'll recognize in the 17th century, you know, Spain was in the pinnacle position. What did they do? Destroyed themselves with debt. The next century, it was France, same thing. Even your country in the 19th century. You look at ancient Rome. You know, why would the United States think that it is immune from those kinds of problems? So clearly, you know, we have to start thinking about how do we create an environment that will be conducive to success for future generations. And how do we lead in a world that is falling into chaos because there is no real leadership?
Dr. Carson, introduce yourself to our worldwide audience here. Where have you got? What journey have you gone on to get to this day?
My mother realized that education was really the great divide, and she insisted, that we turn off the TV, read books, submit to her written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And, we developed a sense of understanding that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you, and that you have the responsibility. So both my brother and I began to achieve at very high levels academically. I went on to Yale University, University of Michigan for medical school, and then had an amazing career in neurosurgery as the director of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins for 29 years. Decided that I would retire, and I operated on nearly 15,000 patients. So I said, and my wife was very much enthusiastic, we would relax a little bit and enjoy life. But after the National Prayer Breakfast, there were so many people just clamoring for me to get involved politically, to run for high office. I kind of didn't really take that seriously, but it persisted and continued to grow. And as I talked to more people around the country, particularly elderly people, who told me they had given up and they were just waiting to die, but now they felt perhaps there was some hope. And my whole life has been about solving problems. My medical career was quite controversial because I was always pushing the envelope, trying to come up with solutions. And as a matter of fact, was able to do a number of things that had never been done before. And I think we're in that situation with our nation right now.
Okay.
It's a matter...
Dr. Carson, let me just bring in our other contributors, if I may. Jeffrey, Dr. Carson there outlining his brief life story. He's got a ready constituency to talk to, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Carson has a great story of American exceptionalism, despite the fact that politically he would do away with all the safety nets that helped him get out of the ghetto of Detroit and into the Ivy League schools. He has been a brilliant pediatric neurosurgeon, and there's no doubt about his credentials in medicine. I agree with him that his doubts about being qualified for the presidency. Of course, he's not. The fact is, he was voted.
Can I correct
in a minute?
Statement that you just made?
In a minute, doctor. In a minute.
About
You'll be
wanting to get rid of all the safety nets?
Let just Jeffrey finish the point, if you may. Jeffrey?
You'll be given all the chances you have because you put your neck up above the parapet. And I'm sure that Armstrong warned you that we would take potshots at you. Now, the fact is, your story is really a great one. And I'm sure Armstrong warned you that there would be buts. You've never held elected office. You make decidedly basic mistakes about foreign affairs. You've just made one about history in Spain, France, and England. You deny science. Now, you're perfectly entitled to your creationism beliefs, but they do fly in the face of everything you learned in medical school biology class. You have compared, rather upsettingly, Obamacare to slavery, and you say outlandishly stupid things about homosexuals. You don't act like a serious candidate. You don't talk like a serious candidate. And most people would not consider you a serious candidate. Why should you be running for president?
First of all, people like yourself make very blatantly false statements. Like you just said, I want to do away with all the safety nets after benefiting from them. That's a blatantly false statement. And I don't know where you're getting your information from, but clearly not appropriate information. What I would like to do, however, is recognize that the trillions of dollars that have been spent in an attempt to eradicate poverty have not worked. In 1969, 1.4% of the population was on food stamps. Today, it's over 14%. Basically, all the things that were supposed to be fixed by the Great Society and throwing money at these problems have gotten worse. More family breakup, more crime, all the things that were supposed to be fixed are not good. What I am saying is what intelligent people do, and I don't care which side of the aisle they're on, they say, this is not working. And we want to achieve something different. Let's look at some other possibilities, ways that we can invest in our fellow citizens to bring them out of a state of dependency and allow them to be independent, contributing citizens. Now, I know that that's something that doesn't work for some people, but I think it will be extremely effective.
Let me bring in Armstrong here. Jeffrey, come back in a minute. Armstrong, just bring in answer me this point. Can an independent voice, somebody who has no political experience whatsoever, ever achieve high office, if we're being realistic?
The great thing about America, there was a time in our country when we thought there was never would be a possibility or a probability that someone like President Barack Obama could occupy the White House. I can say emphatically something like that could never happen in Europe. There's no place in Europe where that is even remotely possible to happen. And in America, which is still that shining hill on the city, which sets an example and unprecedented examples for the world, that is still a possibility. Whether Dr. Carson is that candidate or not, that remains to be seen. But Dr. Carson, what I like to do, I think what Jeffrey's raised is nothing unusual. I think you've heard it before, and I do think he asked a question that should be answered in terms of what do you think it is that people don't understand and know about you, and particularly given your medical field, which people seem to say that because you're in the medical field, it does not translate that you're running for president of the United States. What it is in the medical field that people don't understand, and what is it in your life you think has prepared you for this moment?
I think the thing that is most important is the ability to solve problems, to look at facts, to take evidence and use that to make decisions rather than ideology. And I think that's what a lot of people in our nation are hungry for. We've had lots of people who have many, many, many years of political experience who really don't seem to manifest much in the way of the ability to solve problems. And, you can gain wisdom from lots of different avenues. It doesn't all have to be in the political realm. Jeffrey,
there's room for the political novice.
Yeah, no, there isn't. Not in the White House. There is certainly not. I mean, Dr. Carson still hasn't answered my question after saying such things, inflammatory things, as comparing Obamacare to slavery and making completely stupid remarks about homosexuals. Why should anybody take him seriously? He's a serious candidate when he doesn't sound like one, act like one, or is one.
First of all, I said it was the worst thing since slavery. I don't think there's anything that occurred in America that is as bad as slavery. Now, having said that, the reason that I am opposed to Obamacare is because it takes the most important thing that a person has, their life, their health care, and it puts it in the hands of the government. It puts it in the hands of a bureaucracy. And what I think would be considerably better is a system that allows the interaction to be between the patient and the healthcare provider. What do you need for good healthcare? You need a patient and a healthcare provider. Along comes the middleman to facilitate the relationship, and then it becomes the primary entity dictating to both the others, and it doesn't even need to be there as it sucks out enormous amounts of resources. You look at a program like Medicaid for the poor in our country. It has an annual budget of $400 billion. A quarter of the population participates. That's 80 million people. 80 million into 400 billion, $5,000 a piece for each man, woman, and child. Now, if you use that in an efficient way, the concierge programs, the boutique practices generally cost somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a year. You put everybody in one of those and still have thousands left over for catastrophic health care, which would be much cheaper because everything's not coming out of it.
Let me just make that point with Jeffrey. I'll come back to Armstrong in a second. Just answer this question, which I know a lot of critics of Obamacare have said that it is wasteful, it's extravagant, it does not need to cost as much as it does. Jeffrey?
No, first of all, Obamacare does not put the government into the examination room. It puts an insurance company into the examination room. That's what it is. The government does not dictate. But the interesting thing that Dr. Carson is not discussing is the fact that he has raised serious questions about prolonging life with the elderly, which brings up Sarah Palin's brilliant idea of death panels. I mean, Dr. Carson, shame on you.
Well, let me answer that. What I've said is if people have their health savings accounts, and that's taking care of most of their issues, they get to make the decisions how they're going to use that money, particularly at the end of their life. They can decide quite readily that I'm going to spend all this money that I have accumulated over this time because I want every drop of every medical thing done before I die, Or they may say, you know, I think I'm going to transfer this to my daughter or my grandson. They get to make the decision. No one else is making the decision for them. That's what I'm about. I'm about empowering people. The United States was designed of, for, and by the people, not of, for, and by the government.
Well, I wish we could talk for the whole half hour, but we can't at this case. Will you come back? Dr. Ben Carson, thank you. And gentlemen, back with you in just a second. Now, a reminder, you can catch up with the Sky News debate on Apple TV, on Roku, on Catch Up, and of course at skynews.com/US. Just a couple of years ago, there was such a great promise for the Arab Spring. But throughout the region, poverty and hunger has risen dramatically. In Egypt, more than a quarter of the population are, by UN standards, poor and malnourished. The same figure, about 25%, are illiterate. Well, Mama Maggie is someone who is trying to make a difference. From a privileged early life in the upper classes of Egypt and a dynamic job, Maggie Gobran had everything, then gave that up to help children of Cairo's slums. And you can see she's joined us now. Mama Maggie, thank you for being part of our programme today. What brought about that change in your life?
It's mainly the love. When you already feel your heart is beating and some children who needs you, you cannot stop it.
But you were a professor of computer science. You were working in academia. You'd become brilliant at your job. What made you give all that up?
When I visited the poor areas for the first time, the children came around and held my arms and said, "Don't leave us." And I could see my own children's eyes looking at me and saying, "We need you." And I just felt I cannot leave them alone.
And is part of your calling your faith? Is that important to you?
Of course, you know, the human being is body, mind, and spirit. And when three of them are united, you can do miracles. And every human who needs help, we feel this is our job to help each other. The more we give, the more we receive.
Let me bring in my regular guests, Jeffrey Robinson standing by in New York and Armstrong Williams, who's in Washington. Armstrong, this is an extraordinary and humbling tale.
I would love for our guests to convey just the devastation, what is required, not just money, but maybe resources that from the United States, maybe food and clothing, I mean, just shoes and towels, soap, that ordinary things that we take for granted, because obviously you come from a middle-class family, but when you see poverty, it's nothing like you've ever seen before. So talk about what you've seen, and just talk about just how the Arab Spring exacerbated the situation and in no way made it better.
They do need food, bread, but they need love and acceptance. They are naked from clothes, but they need their identity, self-respect and self-esteem. And that's what we are trying to do. We first went to help them. They helped us to be better people. They need everything that you can imagine.
And from us observing your part of the world from afar, particularly afar, I guess, in the Americans' case, the Arab Spring seemed to have so much hope about it. But is the reality it's made life worse for many people rather than better?
Yes. I've seen many of them being so successful, and they come back and they say, because I've learned in one of your centers, I want to serve with you to help other generations to become successful like me.
Yeah, Mama Maggie, you are an inspiration to the world. God bless you, and long may you wave. I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. But let me ask, what help are you getting from the outside world, outside of Egypt? And what hurdles do you encounter inside Egypt?
Thank you, sir. And the best thing is to find the person having reconciliation with his own self. If we got inner peace, we can present peace. If we got the joy from inside, then we can present joy to others from outside to outside. And that is what we have learned over many years, that everything comes from inside.
Are you receiving any help from the?
Of course, all the good hearts. We are all human. When you find someone, a human, needs your help, you immediately stretch your hand and help. We receive help from all over the world, and we receive thanks from all over the world, because when they help, they receive more than what they give. Yes, we do receive from everywhere.
Maggie, you can set an example to us all in your generosity and your belief in the power of inner peace and a lot of the positivity coming from the self. But in the real world, politics plays a part. Governments play a part, don't they? They create the sort of country that other people either enjoy or they suffer the consequences of poverty. What do you say to the politicians who are in charge?
I would say thank you if you're doing honestly a good job. We're grateful and thankful. And I would say please every now and then review your own peace, inner peace. If what you're doing is really for the good of others, then rejoice.
And for the Coptic Christians, that particular denomination, do you feel your faith, your very lives are under threat right now?
We thank God. Right now, we are in the best situation ever for many years. And we love our country, we love our president, and we love our people. And we're looking forward for many years, the best to come.
Maggie Gobran, a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining us today. Next, what's in a name, asked William Shakespeare. Perhaps we now should ask, what's in a domain name? The dark arts of choosing a .something suffix is becoming increasingly tricky. Soon, .porn, .adult, .sucks and 500 others will all become available. Well, let's bring in Jeffrey Robinson in New York and Armstrong Williams in Washington. Are you reserving any domain names, Jeffrey?
I was thinking of reserving .Armstrong Williams. I like that. Listen, I'm all in favor of this. I think it's great. I would draw the line with .Nazi. I think maybe we have to have some modicum of adulthood. But there's a wonderful story from years ago that I covered, 15 or so years ago, when somebody was complaining about Dunkin' Donuts and found out that Dunkin' Donuts did not have DunkinDonuts.com. So he got it, set up a website that offered a publication of everybody's complaints about Dunkin' Donuts. The company, rather stupidly, instead of responding to the complaints, decided they could shut him up by buying the domain name. They did. He took the money and then set up one called DunkinDonutsSucks.com. He could save himself a lot of problems because now he could just have any company .sucks. I like that a lot.
Armstrong, this is a problem. I mean, this is an area you work in with your various media interests. Is every company going to have to buy up these top-level domain names just to protect themselves?
Well, yeah, we are in the business, but you know what? It's very expensive. It's another way to make money. Even if these individuals buy these domain names for $9.95 or whatever the price is, they're not going to be able to criticize the companies. The bottom line is that the problem is that oftentimes you don't realize that your domain and your name has value until the light goes out in your head and you go to buy it and somebody else sucks it up. You know, listen, you know, it's the World Wide Web. Obviously, there's pros and cons to it, but I just think in the long run, you just have to see how it plays out. But for us, what we do, we buy everything backwards, forward, middle, sideways that says Armstrong Williams on the right side, and we own it. I mean, that's just the way you got to do it. Seriously, we don't leave anything even possible that you can buy when it rates with Armstrong, Williams, Army, Post, Army, Army, Strong, Army. And so that's just the way you have to think these days. Because let me tell you something. With some of these domain names, I remember once we had a domain name. We said, oh, this would be a great name. And when we looked at it, somebody had to purchase. We probably end up paying about $10,000 or $12,000 for it. So something has to be done.
You can only afford to do that because you're a very wealthy man, Armstrong Williams, I think. For the likes of Jeffrey and I, just humble practitioners, well, just a .com site, that's quite expensive, Jeffrey.
Yes.
You can buy .com sites for, as Armstrong said, $9.95. But I wonder what he'll offer me for .Armstrong Williams.
Well, Jeffrey, you would get a special price. Very special, because you are very special, and you become more special every week. So take that into consideration.
I may give it to you for your 80th birthday.
That's quite enough of you two agreeing for once on something. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. And that's it for this edition of The Debate. Don't forget, you can continue watching Sky News on Apple TV, on Roku, on Catch Up, and of course at skynews.com/US. Until next time, goodbye.